Hello, everyone, and welcome to Night 2 of the 2020 Values Voter Summit. I'm Tony Perkins, President of the Family Research Council, and I welcome you to our studios for the virtual Values Voter Summit. We have another great lineup of speakers for you tonight, but before I tell you who's going to join us this evening, let me ask you a question. Have you taken the challenge? Maybe if this is your first night, you're saying, what challenge? The challenge to pray, vote, and stand. Our goal, 1 million values voters taking the challenge to pray, vote, and to stand. And then share the challenge with your family and friends. It's right there at the website, prayvotestand.org, prayvotestand.org. All right, tonight we'll be joined by Dr. Al Mohler, president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. We'll be joined by talk show host Dana Lash. Also, abortion survivors Melissa Oden and Claire Colwell, former Planned Parenthood abortion clinic manager Abby Johnson, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, Missouri Congresswoman Ann Wagner. Our Judicial Crisis Network court panel will feature Marjorie Dannenfelser, Andrew Womack with Truth and Liberty Coalition, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham, you won't want to miss that interview, Congressman Jody Hice. But to begin our evening together, we want to begin in prayer. Pray, vote, stand. To open us up tonight in prayer, Bishop Vincent Matthews. He's the missions president of the Church of God in Christ. Bishop, welcome to the Values Voter Summit.
Bless you, Tony. What an honor to be with you on this most important occasion.
You know, Bishop, when we look at what's happening all around our nation, even tonight, you know, we should be reminded that we need prayer. America needs prayer.
Absolutely. And the demonic activity that we see in America and around the world, but especially here in America, is at a very high level. And the scripture reminds us that the warfare that we're fighting is definitely not carnal, it's spiritual. And so I thank you and FRC for taking on this spiritual battle with this summit and the great speakers that you have coming on today.
Well, tonight, Bishop, our focus is on life, on the courts, and I know you have been an outspoken advocate of the sanctity, for the sanctity of human life, and I want to thank you for your leadership. But as you pray tonight, this is one of those defining issues that we respect all human life, including the life of the unborn. And so I'm going to ask you tonight to open us in prayer. And pray for us. Pray for not only for our event tonight, but pray for our nation as we wrestle with these defining issues.
Amen, Tony. I agree. And let us pray, because it's such a fundamental issue of just the personhood of God's creation. And so let us pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, we come to you now saying thank you. We thank you for life. We thank you for strength, but we live in a time of crisis. Since 1973, it has been legal to exterminate the life of young men or children, boys and girls, at will. And Father, it's unconscionable what is happening in our land. Millions have been killed around the world. And yet the bloodthirsty demonic activity in our land continues. Father, I ask that you touch hearts as this genocide affects segments of our population disproportionately more than others. As that you touch hearts and make it that people will hear you, and that one day soon it will become unthinkable for individuals to have abortion. It is, one life is too much, but the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been killed, even during this COVID time, hurts our hearts. So Father, touch our elected officials, touch our pastors, touch the people of God to be courageous and to stand. Touch those who are post-abortive, who've been fooled and tricked, but now know the truth of the decisions that they made. Help them to find healing. And Father, touch those that may find themselves in an unwanted pregnancy to recognize that there are godly options. And most of all, may there be young men and young women raised up that will follow biblical values and have families as you would have them to be, and their marriages and their pregnancies will be within the confines of a marriage. So Father, I thank you for those who are on the front line fighting. I thank you for courage and strength, and we ask that you push back the darkness and let your light shine. In Jesus' name we pray and we give you glory. Amen.
Amen and amen. Bishop, thank you so much for being a part of the Values Voter Summit, and keep standing and keep proclaiming truth. My next guest is as comfortable holding a gun as she is a microphone. She's the #1 nationally syndicated female talk radio host in America and the author of several books, including her latest, Grace Canceled. She hosts The Dana Show from Dallas, Texas, and we're proud to have her here tonight, kicking off the second night of the virtual Values Voter Summit. Dana Lash, welcome.
Tony, so good to see you virtually and be with you and everyone else. I mean, distance hugs for everybody.
Well, we would love to have you here in person, but as we're reaching out, we're so glad that you're with us tonight. I got a few questions for you tonight, and I know that you don't have any absence of answers as you're on radio each and every day. As I said, you are the leading female voice on radio. All of the focus right now has shifted. We finally found a way to get the coronavirus off the front lines and the headlines and the media to move on, and it's the Supreme Court. How do you see this unfolding?
That's that's the question of our time right now, isn't it? I really hope, and I talked about this at length on the program today. I hope, first off, that people realize how important the judicial issues are when going to vote, and they pay attention to who their judges are, especially now that we've had all of these mandates come out during the lockdown as it relates to worshiping, congregating, fellowshipping together on Sunday morning and Wednesday evenings, and really just a youth group and any other time for church services. But as it relates to the Supreme Court, I actually feel pretty optimistic, and I feel optimistic about the choices that we have. And I feel incredibly happy that there are some really good candidates who understand the importance of faith in this country. They understand the importance of virtue, and they singularly realize that the importance of being originalists and not reinterpreting what they think the Constitution says and just simply adhering to what it states. I know Amy Coney Barrett is a front runner. I know Barbara Lagoa down in Florida is a front runner. We have a lot of great choices, and I think that speaks a lot to not just people who might be on the right or conservatives or Republicans or whatever, but a lot of faith-based groups that have done so much to help people, Alliance for Defending Freedom and others that have been able to, through all of their actions, bring up some of these individuals and work with some of these people who actually are on the list today. Allison Rushing, I believe, is one of those individuals who's right on the list of contenders. So I feel good about the process ahead. And I really, I have my choices, but I've written about that. I've talked about that, but I feel good about it, Tony. I really do. And I feel like we're in a really good place and sort of reaffirming our values with which the spirit with which the Constitution was written.
Yeah, we're at one of those pivotal moments because we're, for the first time, about to potentially see the court shift to a solid constitutionalist viewpoint. Which is new.
Right.
I mean, the Republicans have had a lot of picks, in fact, the majority of the picks in the last 40 years, but they've not gotten it right. This president seems determined to do so. And one of the reasons I think we're on the right track, to echo what you just said, is that we're already seeing attacks launched on these nominees, potential nominees, based on their faith. Now remember, Amy Coney Barrett that you mentioned, she was the one that Dianne Feinstein talked about, the dogma speaking loud within her. How should the church be responding when we see these attacks, and we know they're coming, on the whole issue of faith?
I love this issue, Tony. I love it so much because this is really where the faith shines. And this is really, and I loved Barrett's response to that as well, because she can stand there and articulate and push back just as good as she gets it. But that's the question. I noticed that this was never posed of the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who it was said, her Jewish faith really contributed to her, to really her discernment and how she approached judicial review but apparently this is a hurdle as it concerns Amy Coney Barrett. And I don't quite understand that. Maybe it's because it's a Trump selection. Maybe it's because, she's considered to be on the right. But whatever it is, this is really the faith's time to shine, to be able to speak to the issues that are, we're going to be looking at life issues. We're going to be looking at Second Amendment issues. There's a lot of stuff that's coming down the road for us to consider, not just in the next 5 years, 10 years. This is a generational impact. As far as how the church should respond, I think speaking joyfully and firmly in truth is the way to respond. We have every reason to be happy warriors. We really do, because the battle's already been won. We have every reason to smile and be happiest to and joyful and kind and bless the people who persecute us, because this has already been decided for us, Tony. We've already won. And really, ultimately, no matter who is selected for the bench, we've already won. So I feel great about that. And I think, honestly, that's the perspective at which the church needs to come at this and remind the faithful about that battle. And, we're going to have a lot of chances to demonstrate our how we approach living. You mentioned the dogma lives loudly within you, that remark that Feinstein gave. Well, yeah, it lives loudly within all of us. That's why so many Christians go and help the homeless, and they serve the needy, and they meet people where they are. It's why so many Christians are there in times of need during lockdown, helping to support the business owner, helping the single mom, trying to take care of her children, adopting children, doing whatever they need to do to fulfill the need in the kingdom. And that's what it's all about. So I think I think that this is a great opportunity. And I think that the church, never before has there ever been a time, in modern era, for which the church has been just so singularly perfect to take on such an important leading role. And yes, leading role, because with all of the chaos and everything around us, honestly, this is the time when people are looking for calm and joyful and reasoned voices, and people who speak in truth instead of fanning the flames of division.
Yeah, Dana, let me put a fine point on that, because when you talk about, we need to be joyful, happy, because we know how this is going to turn out. We're on the winning side. But you're not saying what some would suggest, maybe waving a white flag, the woke preachers and tennis shoes that you've talked about. There's a big difference. We can go with confidence, but we're standing for truth.
Right. And thank you for bringing that up. This has been a big issue with me. And, during the lockdown, with so many churches that have closed, and I understand you want to be good stewards of your fellow man, and especially in the early days when we didn't really know a lot about this virus or the level of contagiousness, or really even how it spread. There was a lot of discussion and back and forth about that, and contradictory things even from the CDC. But when churches had their doors closed and when everyone was at home, that's really hard for people who really subsist on fellowship. It's hard for them to get through, and it's hard spiritually, it's hard emotionally. It's for our students, it's hard academically. And with all of this, I think we didn't have any of life's distractions to see everything else that was happening around us. And so now everything is intensified because the world has been a little bit quiet, for the lack of a better way to put it. So we see the Marxist cultural movement wrapping itself up in the veneer of inequality and injustice. And I'm speaking of the official group Black Lives Matter, who just very recently edited their website to remove their attack on the family unit. That was one of the things that they had discussed. And you mentioned, these churches and whether or not being joyful and being a happy warrior means waving the white flag. It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't, because there are times when there are times for righteous indignation. And I feel righteous indignation whenever I sit in the pew and I hear a pastor who is more concerned about being woke and appealing to the populace than pleasing God and serving his congregation, incriminate them or indict them with being somehow party to racism or any kind of bigotry. That infuriates me when I see stuff like that. I'll be really honest with you. And that's when, the joy mask drops a little bit. It's kind of hard to be a happy warrior. And admittedly, in that instance, because, good people, and my pastor has even said this, good people, they are offended by the moral failing of bigotry. They are offended over the sin of bigotry like racism, anything in which you are trying to supplant God as the judge, as the ultimate judge in the case, and you're trying to say that some people somehow have a more redeemable quality than other people because of variables that they can't control. Good people are offended when they are accused of something this heinous, because it's a heinous accusation. And it is equally heinous to falsely accuse good people of something like that as a political ploy. And so when I am sitting in my church and I am looking to the shepherds for guidance, and I'm looking to these leaders, these faith influencers in these times, and instead of being that light and guiding the flock, they're lying to us and telling us that we've offended the Marxist wolves and that they're basically leading the flock to the pack for slaughter. I do get righteously indignant over that, as I think any good person would. There's a time to speak out on these injustices. There's a difference between being empathetic and then just completely caving to a false narrative because you think it's better to go along than get along. Well, Jesus never thought that. Jesus never taught that, ever, not at all, not once. And so those pastors who are really, they're in the word, but they're also saying, look, this is the truth and this is the reality. There are groups out there that are trying to emotionally and spiritually blackmail you and accuse you of being racist if you don't cave to these demands. Right. I ask those I ask those faith leaders, I ask those churches, I ask those pastors, why are you insisting on pushing a solution that seeks atonement outside of the Gospels? Why are you pushing a strategy that seeks reconciliation outside of Christ? Because these are serious grievances we're talking about and some serious sins that have been done to people. Hurt people, and the only person who can save is Jesus.
So well said, and it is a form of emotional and cultural blackmail, but it requires standing up and proclaiming truth to counter it. That's the only way you can defeat a lie. Dana Lash, thank you so much for being with us. As always, great to have you at the Values Voter Summit.
Always good to be with everyone. I love this event. And Tony, we are so grateful for you, and we pray for you and everyone there on your team, because you do such amazing work, and keep on doing it, because you are a voice of reason and a real light in these times. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Dana. Appreciate that so much. Well,
Hi, everybody. Gil Mertz here, and thank you, Tony. Thank you, Dana. What a great way to kick us off for what's going to be an exciting night for all of us. So if you're at home and you're torn a little bit about whether you watch this or your favorite television program, remember, that is why God created DVR, so you can watch us live tonight. Okay, I need to take care of a few announcements before we move on, so please listen carefully, because what I'll be sharing with you, a lot of folks have asked about, and so this will help explain all of that. First of all, we want to thank all of our major sponsors for helping make this our first ever virtual Values Voter Summit possible, and those include AFA Action, American Values, the Judicial Crisis Network, the Truth and Liberty Coalition, and of course, Family Research Council and FRC Action. We also want to thank our other sponsors who have made this possible this year, and that includes the Bot Radio Network as our radio sponsor. Our media sponsor this year is the Christian Post. Our streaming sponsors include the Timothy Plan and the Christian Healthcare Ministries, and also the Leadership Institute, who is sponsoring our activist training. You'll be hearing a lot more about each of those as our week progresses. If you're not watching the summit through our official streaming site at live.valuesvotersummit.org, you can go to valuesvotersummit.org to register for free, and you can have the full Values Voter Summit experience. You'll be able to access breakouts. You'll also be able to study the different party platforms and compare those as you look at those. There'll be a presidential and key race voter guides available at that site, a biblical worldview publications, and other resources. And all of these are designed to better equip you, as our theme says, to pray for our nation, to vote your biblical values, and to stand for truth. And when you visit the exhibitor page, and thank God for our exhibitors, you can chat with iVote Guide. You can also chat live with Columbia International University, and you can chat with the Heritage Foundation in their custom pages simply by clicking on their logos there at the website. If you've not done so already, we also encourage you to go to valuesvotersummit.org and sign up for the activist training. And that's going to be on Saturday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And last of all, each VVS episode this week, as well as the activist training on Saturday, will be available after the event on the official VVS website. Again, that's at live.valuesvotersummit.org. And if you didn't register for this special event, again, just go to valuesvotersummit.org and you'll be sent login credentials. You'll want to be a part of that. All right, we want to start tonight with our first poll question. It's pretty simple. Oh, it's a simple question, but a hard answer, because we're going to get a lot of them. Here it is. Here is our question for tonight. What one word best describes what's going on in America today? We're going to put all of your answers up in the cloud. In a few minutes, we'll take a look at those. We'd love to interact with you. We want to hear from you. If you can sum it up in one word, what best describes America today? All right, we're going to switch now back to Tony Perkins and join him with his special guest.
Thanks, Gil. Our next guest, Dr. Al Mohler Jr., is the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, one of the world's largest seminaries. He hosts the podcast, The Briefing and Thinking in Public. He's a prolific writer whose most recent book, The Gathering Storm, Secularism, Culture, and the Church, was released earlier this year. Dr. Mohler is no stranger to standing for the truth in the face of cultural opposition. So we're so grateful that he is joining the virtual Values Voter Summit here tonight. Dr. Mohler, welcome.
Tony, it's great to be with you and with all those gathered with you, virtually and in person.
Well, first off, I want to acknowledge that you're coming to us from Louisville, Kentucky, an undisclosed location there in Louisville. But today, in all seriousness, a former police officer was indicted on charges connected to the raid where Breonna Taylor was killed, but no charges on Breonna Taylor's death. And the media reports that we're getting show a potential for escalation. So this is certainly one of those issues we need to be praying about as we see a string of these types of incidents occurring across the nation, resulting in civil unrest. And tonight, obviously, there's concern about violence there in Louisville. Let me just ask you this, Dr. Mohler, as we see these, it's like a repeat. We see these things happening again and again. As Christians, how should we respond to crises like these?
Well, Tony, what a great question. You know, we as Christians know that we are to seek righteousness and justice. Those are mandates given to us by God. But human beings through the long course of human history, and Christians thinking about this seriously for 2 millennia, understand that justice comes by means of the rule of law, and it never comes by any other means. And the rule of law never achieves perfect justice. And in this life, we never actually will know perfect justice. Only God can execute perfect justice. But in the United States, what we have is a system of laws, not of men, as we often say. And that meant that today, for example, Attorney General Daniel Cameron here in Kentucky had to make a ruling according to the law as special prosecutor. And I think he set out that case just extremely well. And he set the contrast well, too. We either have the rule of law or we have mob justice. And as I often say, 2 words that never go together are mob justice. And we need to pray for peace on the streets of our nation, and very troubled by some of the events that are taking place. We don't say that we live in a perfect world and there are no problems. We as Christians know better than that. But we understand that the rule of law is how these issues have to be addressed. And without respect for the rule of law and without allowing the rule of law to move forward, then we doom ourselves to nothing more than whatever any group at any given time will call justice. We're not called merely to do what we think is right and call it justice. We're called to pursue justice.
You and I spoke about this earlier on my radio program about, the fact is you'll never achieve justice through lawlessness. It just doesn't work that way. We also talked about what you see as the most significant issues facing our nation as we move into this 2020 election. What are those issues that the values voters should be watching, praying about, speaking to, and standing up for?
You know, Tony, in the 2020 election, we face in this context of this remarkable year, we face the fact that finally the mask is off, so to speak. The gloves are off. Now we find out that there are those who are calling for basically the undoing of the American experiment and replacing it with something else. We see those who are saying that the United States is, by its very existence, an unredeemable project, and the radical nature of frankly, what's being advocated by so many in the public square these days. It's final honesty after what we've known was that intention for a very long time. And so you see the subversion of the courts, and the courts turned into engines of social liberalism. You see how the school systems and higher academia have been basically taken over by what is rightly called the adversary culture. And we as Christians have to understand that now we're being told right out loud what we should have known, and that is that we're down to fundamental issues. And of course, the most fundamental of all is the sanctity of human life. And here we are in 2020, and the choice could not be more obvious. And it's a forced choice. Americans are either going to stand for the sanctity of human life or they're going to subvert it, one or the other.
You know, it really is becoming easier in a way because it's so discernible. It's black and white. There's really very little gray area. You know, when I look at what's happening on the streets, and Dr. Moeller, I mean, I know you look at it this way, but I look at this from a biblical worldview. So all these events that are occurring around us, we also consider the spiritual dynamics. I have to believe there is a relationship between the lawlessness, the looting, the unrest, and the fact that our churches have been shuttered for months now. Now, let me just say, I supported the initial call for the churches, to close just for, the first 2 weeks, then it turned into a month to slow the spread. But we're now going on 6 months. At what point should the churches be looking at this and questioning the motives of government and their mandate from God?
You know, Tony, another really good question. I think what we see is the fact that some politicians have taken this COVID as an opportunity for overt hostility to religious congregations, and especially to Christian churches. And that overt hostility is what we have to confront. No government authority has a right to say that church isn't essential. No government authority has the right to tell us how we are to order our worship services. And no government has the authority to say that Christian churches or other religious gatherings can be uniquely discriminated against. Where there are reasonable, temporary, generally applicable rules, well, I think we'll all understand that, but that's not what we're looking at in some cases. In D.C. with Mayor Bowser, and in California with Governor Newsom, we're looking at unrealistic, unconstitutional, opportunistic, and overtly hostile actions. And at that stage, we have to confront. And we need to be clear. I don't think we should be saying that we want to escape and have an escape clause from the rightful orders that are given to people in the society out of concern for health. That we respect zoning laws, even though, or we contest them in court. We respect what the fire marshal says is the limitation of how many people can sit in a room. But it better not be different for a Christian church than it is for the local high school and its auditorium. It better not be any different for a casino, as we have seen in the state of Nevada unconstitutionally, than for a Christian church. And I think what we're seeing right now is a political opportunism that is actually overt hostility. And we've got to confront that.
I do agree with you, because as I see it, we're setting a precedent by what we will tolerate. And I'm concerned that this may come back again if the church simply sits silently, knowing that we're being treated differently in a way that prevents us from carrying out our mission.
You know, Tony, it also, to me, underlines the importance of the judiciary, because we are looking at the fact that with the Supreme Court seat now, very much in question, a lot of these questions are eventually going to be settled by the United States Supreme Court. It's going to matter hugely who sits on that court. And what we've seen in the last several months is it takes a majority, a clear majority on that court, to be able to get the cases that are really important before the court. I've been, as you've been, very disappointed that, for instance, the case of that Nevada church didn't even get heard by the Supreme Court. Clearly, we've got work to do there, and now we have the opportunity.
That may be changing very, very soon. Dr. Al Mohler, thanks so much for joining us at the Values Voter Summit. Always great to talk with you, my friend.
And with you, Tony. Thank you so much. God bless you all.
Good night.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Dr. Mohler. And certainly our prayers are with the people in Louisville tonight, and we'll just continue to keep you updated on it as events occur. All right, I think we're ready to give you the poll results of our first question, and that's when we asked you to best describe what one word you would use for what's happening in America today. So if we have that, let's go ahead and put that up. No surprises there, but let's look at those together. Anarchy was certainly high. Godlessness, division, evil is certainly up there. Confusion. These are we keep popping it up. Spiritual warfare. You know, folks, let's remember, even though it looks political, we are very much in a spiritual warfare. And that's why we need to pray, vote, and stand. But the number one by far is chaos. And we know that God is not the author of confusion. We know where this is coming from, and that's why we are encouraging everyone to pray, to stand, and to vote, to do something about this chaos. Well, thank you for participating, and we'll have another poll question for you coming up. Meanwhile, we want to give you the opportunity to submit a question about the issue coming up with the Supreme Court. In just a few moments, we'll be talking with a panel about that very issue, and we'll be taking your questions. And so feel free, right now, I believe it's on the right of your screen, you can type in your question, just a short question, hit submit, and we'll be collecting those questions and do our best to get those on the air. All right, so do that now. For now, we want to take a closer look at one of our awesome sponsors. Let's learn a little more about the Christian Post.
When the faithful are persecuted and churches are under pressure, when the youth march for life and revival ignites on the beach, there's someone to gather the facts and bring you the true story. The Christian Post is a unique, trusted news source, bringing you news and analysis 365 days a year, and doing so from an uncompromising biblical worldview. This means we believe in the one true God who is still on his throne and in control of history. Since our nation's founding, God has blessed America with bedrock values like all men are created equal and the freedom to worship, speak, and live by the dictates of our own conscience. All values now under assault. The president we elect this year must lead America to overcome these threats. This is perhaps the most critical election in our history. Let us pray God will continue to bless America and give us the courage to vote our convictions this November.
We are so grateful for the Christian Post, one of the many great sponsors that is helping to bring this to you tonight and the rest of this week. We're now about to hear a truly beautiful testimony from an abortion survivor. So folks, just relax, sit back, and let's hear this amazing story. Please meet Claire Colwell.
Hey, Values Voter Summit. This is Claire Colwell. I am so excited to be with you and get to share my story. Now more than ever, voting is so important, and voting for life is so important. I know this personally because my life is a miracle. I didn't know this for so long, but 10 years ago, I found out that I am the surviving twin of a botched D&E dismemberment abortion. The very abortion that took the life of my twin, that tore my twin's body apart limb by limb, miraculously left me untouched. For so long, I thought that I would never be that person that had been affected by abortion. I thought that person that's been affected by abortion, they don't live in my community. They are not a part of my church. They are not in my family, but I was wrong. The day my birth mother told me about her abortion that I survived, I saw these tears in her eyes. And it was unlike any pain that I had ever experienced. It was unlike anything that I had ever seen. Her tears spoke louder than any words that she shared with me that day. And that from that day forward, I knew that I had to do something, because abortion had not empowered my birth mother. It had not empowered me. And my birth mother was desperately looking for someone to stand in the gap for her in her moment of crisis, when she walked into the doors of a facility that performed a late-term abortion on her. And I knew in that moment, as she shared those words with me, that I had to vote for life from here on out. And so that's what I have done, and that's what I am asking you to do at the polls this year, is to vote for life, because lives are literally on the line. When I met my birth mother, I realized that there was a face and a name and a story with that unborn child, and also with that woman who is contemplating an abortion, or who has regretted her abortion for so many years. You see, when you look at my face, you see my twin. You are literally looking at the face of that unborn child in my twin sibling that was aborted. And when you hear the story of my birth mother, you are hearing a similar story that millions of women share across the country, that they deeply regret their abortion. Their abortion didn't empower them. Being told that they had to take the life of their child in order to live their life, in order to be successful, didn't empower them. Life did. And so I want to encourage you to vote for life this year as we head into the election. A vote for life is a vote for women. It is a vote to empower women like my birth mother to know that they have options and that there is support available to them. It is a vote to save lives like mine, like the other abortion survivors that you are going to hear from. And it is a vote for the lives of generations like my children, who wouldn't have a mother if that abortion had successfully taken my life as it was meant to. I don't know about you, but I dream of a day when no other woman like my birth mother experiences the pain and the regret of abortion, a day when no other woman is told that she must end the life of her child in order to do the things that she wants to do, a day when nobody else has to walk the face of this earth as an abortion survivor like I have, and like hundreds of other individuals that are coming forward with their stories have. I dream of that day, and because of you, because your faithfulness to stand up for what is true, for what is right, and your willingness to vote for life this year, I believe that that day will come true. Thank you. Thank you for standing for life and for listening to my story. God bless you all.
Wow, tremendous testimony. I knew you would enjoy that. Well, listen, we have some breaking news tonight that we want to share with you. As you may have heard just recently, Governor Cuomo of New York, talking about the COVID-19 epidemic, said that no human life is expendable. This, of course, is the same governor who lit up the Empire State Building on one of the most radical abortion laws that we've seen in America. But he just came out with a brand new book where he boasts about his leadership lessons from called an American Crisis. And I just wanted to review with you just a couple of the lessons that he learned in managing the COVID crisis in New York, which had by far the most deaths of any city in America. Lesson number one, if you have a medical naval ship in your harbor, use it. Lesson number two, don't move patients with COVID-19 into nursing homes. That would be a really good tip. Lesson number three, do most of your press interviews with your little brother on CNN. And finally, lesson number four, if your decisions blow up in your face, blame everybody else. Well, as we stand in awe of his self-promotion, we'll move on with the rest of our program. And we have got a very special treat for you coming up now. How many of you have seen the movie Unplanned? I see those hands. We've all seen the great movie Unplanned. Well, that is the story for the three of you who haven't seen this amazing movie of Abby Johnson. Abby Johnson used to run a Planned Parenthood facility until she saw just how ghastly the practice was. And she decided then to not only leave that business, but become a pro-life advocate. You're about to meet Abby Johnson in her interview with Tony Perkins. Let's join them now.
A lot of you know about our next guest from the blockbuster movie Unplanned, or from her powerful speech at the RNC convention. After 8 years at Planned Parenthood, Abby Johnson saw some incredible things. But she says it was the abortion she witnessed that changed her life. Abby left the organization determined to expose Planned Parenthood and advocate for the unborn. Now she's the founder of And Then There Were None, a ministry that helped more than 430 workers leave the abortion industry. Abby, thanks so much for joining us here at the Values Voter Summit.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to jump right into this. Abby, take our participants behind the curtain at Planned Parenthood.
Sure. Planned Parenthood is our country's largest abortion provider, as most of you know. I worked there for 8 years of my life, believing that I was there helping women, serving them, and believing the lie that we were there to keep abortion safe, legal, and rare. Because back then, when I started with Planned Parenthood in 2001, that was the talking point, safe, legal, and rare. But now we've moved really into a new era of Planned Parenthood, and those talking points are gone. Now it is about making abortion accessible at all cost, and that includes the cost of safety to the mother. They're no longer concerned with keeping abortion safe to women, although we know that abortion is never truly safe. In order for an abortion to be deemed successful, a unique and individual human being must be killed. And that's the antithesis of safety and why abortion can never be considered health care. But for the woman, we know that abortion is not safe, and the abortion industry is not concerned about safety for the woman. They are only concerned about access, elective abortion at all times, for any reason, through all 9 months of pregnancy.
Now, Abby, it's pretty incredible the work you're doing through your ministry and helping those that are involved in the abortion industry come out. I mean, over 430 of those that have been involved. Is there a common denominator? Is there something that's common about, oh, I had no idea, or I realized this? What is it that helps these mostly women come out of this industry?
I actually need to update that because we're actually right at 600 now who have left the industry, and even 7 full-time abortion doctors who have put down their abortion instruments and are now fighting for life. And Tony, what we find is that it's usually one of two things. It's either something has happened with a baby. So a baby has been born alive and they have been forced to kill that baby that has been born alive. We had a woman who left one time, actually an entire clinic of workers who left after seeing an abortion of quadruplets. So something traumatic with a child that has taken place in the clinic, or there's been something traumatic with a woman. So a woman who has been left to hemorrhage, to death or almost to death on a table. Something traumatic with a woman, something that caused them to really open their eyes. The veil was lifted. And now these workers are seeing, wait a minute, we were here to help women. That's what we were told. We were here to help women, but now we are hurting them. And we are now victimizing women. And so it's usually one of those two things. And that's when they call us. And when they call us, that veil has been ripped away, almost like a Band-Aid. And they're wounded and they're hurting. And they don't see themselves as victims because they recognize that they have bought into this lie many times very eagerly. bought into the lie for money, for whatever it may be. But they realize that they bought into this evil, and now they need to flee that evil. And that's really where we come in. We want to surround them with support, and we want to help them flee that evil as quickly as possible.
So Abby, part of that, as I understand your answer to that, is the understanding of the human side of these babies. And I think that seems to be one of the things that opens the door for so many people, whether they're in the abortion industry or considering an abortion. And that seems to be why Planned Parenthood fights so aggressively to stop an understanding that these are human beings.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the number one reason that they fight against ultrasound legislation across the states. They do not want women to see the ultrasounds of their babies because the ultrasound exposes the lie of the abortion industry. It shows the women that inside of their wombs is a living human being with a beating heart. And so, what would be the big deal, right? What would be the big deal if a woman went into an abortion facility and she was, okay, she made a choice for abortion, but then she sees her ultrasound and she then makes a choice for life. Aren't you pro-choice, abortion industry? Aren't you pro-choice, abortion lobby? Aren't you for a woman making an informed choice? But you see, that's the lie of the abortion lobby. They are not for choice. And we know that. They are for abortion. That's why the whole name pro-choice, that's why it's such a lie. No woman walks to an abortion clinic wanting to have an abortion. They are only walking into an abortion clinic because they feel like they have no other choice. And so, the abortion industry is not about information. It is not about consent. The abortion industry thrives off of misinformation and off of fear. And they exploit that fear. They exploit these vulnerable women at their lowest point in their life. And they do it in the name of money.
Abby, before we run out of time, I want to ask you this as we approach an election, and we've seen over the last year a big discussion about the born alive, those babies who survive an abortion only to be denied health care by some who, in positions of influence New York, Virginia. How big of an issue is that in terms of vulnerability for the abortion industry?
Listen, this is happening all over the country. And I don't want people to be fooled that this is only happening in some states or it's only happening in late-term abortion providers. I need people to understand that this is happening in every state, all around the country. We have abortion workers coming to our ministry. We have them coming to us saying, we were only supposed to be doing abortions up until 16 weeks, but they would, missize the baby intentionally. They would size the baby at 16 weeks, but this baby was really 22 weeks. And that baby would be born alive. And we would sit there and watch it suffocate to death. Or we would put it in a bucket until it drowned to death. Or they would put a cloth over its face until it suffocated. This is happening in every single state across the country. It's happening in abortion clinics down the streets from where you live. These abortion providers that are participating in this barbaric, in this evil, in these demonic acts, they need to face penalties. They need to face charges. This is murder that is taking place inside of these facilities. And I think that it is a misconception to believe that it's only taking place in just a handful of facilities. That is a farce. It's happening far more often than we even understand and realize.
Abby Johnson, thank you so much for joining us here at the Values Voter Summit, and thank you for all that you're doing on behalf of life.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And folks, I want to encourage you with what you've just heard. That's what's on the ballot this fall. That's what we're talking about. A party that would support what Abby just described, allowing babies to die after they survive an attempt on their life through abortion. Or a party who says, you know what, we need to give them medical care. That's a choice that we have to make. I want to encourage you to take the challenge, to pray, to vote, and to stand.
As an adopted daughter, I'm so excited to be here, a part of this huge March for Life.
We march because we truly believe that one day, hopefully soon, abortion will be overturned.
For 47 years, Americans of all backgrounds have traveled from across the country to stand for life. And today, as President of the United States, I am truly proud to stand with you.
If you're looking for powerful stories, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better one than my next guest. Melissa Ohden would tell you that she shouldn't even be here tonight, but God had a different plan. He turned a life that should have ended in tragedy into one of the greatest testimonies for the unborn our country has ever heard. She's not just a survivor, she's an abortion survivor, and today Melissa is here to tell you that the media is wrong. People like her do exist, so many, in fact, that she's launching the Abortion Survivors Network and Policy Center to prove it. Welcome back to Values Voter Summit, Melissa.
Thank you for having me, Tony.
Always great to see you. Thank you so much for what you're doing and taking time to join us tonight. Today, kind of a big day from the standpoint of policy here in Washington, D.C. The president, who's been a strong pro-life president, announcing today new protections for babies who may find themselves in a situation similar to what you did.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the perfect day to be having this conversation. And you're so right, Tony. Our culture has been so impacted by abortion and certainly is, impacted by the abortion industry and politicians that push the abortion agenda so far deeply that stories like mine and Claire's and Josiah's and Hope's, right? I could name off 100 other people, more than 100 other people whose stories are so pushed under the rug by the media and everyone else that people seem to think that this legislation is not necessary and executive order isn't necessary, but I'm here to tell you that it is.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch over the last year as this has unfolded. In fact, talking to Congressman Steve Scalise and Congresswoman Ann Wagner, who are pushing the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. 80 times they've attempted to have a floor vote on this. And of course, you just pointed to it. The defense or the argument against it is, oh, it's not necessary. But we've heard repeatedly Abby Johnson talking about how this happens everywhere, a lot more frequently than people want to admit. Is happening. And a part of this executive order that the president signed today, and of course it is limited because it's an executive order, but part of it is the reporting. So we'll have better numbers to know exactly how often, or better estimation of how often this happens, so we can make the point that this legislation is needed.
It is. I've been saying that for a couple of years now. I want them to prove me wrong, right? If this isn't necessary, then let's at least start tracking the data that tells us that we're wrong, but we know that we're not, Tony. I posted a number on social media just last week, and the number was 17,155. And what that number actually is the number of estimated abortion survivors since Roe versus Wade, simply based on a number that the CDC threw out a long time ago, saying that they estimated about one child a day surviving an abortion.
Wow. Take
that throughout the course of Roe versus Wade, 17,155.
So, Melissa, let me ask you this question. Why do they want to deny that this happens? Why do they want to deny the fact that it does occur, and that the humane thing, the right thing to do would be to provide medical attention?
I've been reading some interesting articles recently, and one of them talked about, how the pandemic is affecting people. And what it was saying, right, is it's so hard for people to grasp numbers in their head. Statistics are so hard for people. And that's why they were saying, right, stories are so important. And I was reading it thinking, yeah, I completely understand that, right? People want to somehow believe that it's not an issue. They can't wrap their head around it. They can't find a solution to it. Once you go there and realize that this is a problem, there's no going back, right? Emotionally or mentally. And I think, Tony, it is easier for people to believe that it doesn't happen. And even though we can spot that cognitive dissonance about it, right? But also, the effect of the media and pro-abortion politicians, the pro-abortion media, they have had such an incredible impact that they're easily believed in our culture. And people like me are vilified.
Yeah, and I think the reason they want to keep that, as you said, sweeping it under the rug, denying the fact that it exists, because those stories are powerful, as opposed to numbers. You mentioned the 17,000, that's one thing. But just one or two stories, like your story, Josiah's story, other stories that are told are powerful because it humanizes this issue, and it moves it from, as Planned Parenthood is so well known for lying about, it's just a blob of tissue. But in fact, we know that that is not the case with stories like yours.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is humanity on full display, right? And I think, at this point in my activism, Tony, my heart hurts not only that they are denying the truth about the unborn and survivors, but when they deny our existence, they're denying the experiences of our biological parents who have been harmed by abortion. They're denying the experiences of clinic workers and nurses who cared for us, who, have never forgotten us. They're, of course, denying hope to people. Survivors are a sign of hope that people can live, people can go on to live beautiful lives. And most survivors are examples of love and forgiveness. And so when they deny our existence, they're preventing people from receiving that message.
Oh, that is so true. Share with our value voters that are gathered from across the country tonight about the Abortion Survivors Network that you've launched.
Yeah, we've existed for, 8 years, but really in 2019, we sprang into action when we saw all of the aggressive legislation being introduced across the nation. And once that door was really open to the media starting to cover our stories, more and more survivors started coming forward and needed really concrete assistance. And so we're continuing to grow. We're going to be launching a C4 side very soon. I can't wait for you to see it, Tony. Let's just say it's going to change things dramatically when it comes to legislation, because survivor stories are going to be put in the hands of organizations and legislators very quickly and easily, so we can humanize the issue of abortion. Through the Abortion Survivors Network itself, we provide healing support through a personalized workbook, small groups, a retreat that we've pushed back a little bit time-wise, but should happen in 2021. That's never happened before for abortion survivors. We do peer support. We had the Face the Choice ad campaign last year that should have made it to the Super Bowl, but we were able to still air it at the March for Life. We're knocking on the door of next year's Super Bowl. Something may still happen. So people are going to come face to face with more stories like mine in a huge way.
That is so good. I'm so grateful for what you're doing, Melissa. How can, let's say we've got some folks out there that are listening or see this, watch it somehow, catch a glimpse of this. How can they connect with you so they can be a part of your network?
Absolutely. We're a movement together, right? I mean, even though we serve survivors, we're serving everybody who's silenced and impacted by abortion. And we are going to end this together. So people can go to our website, abortionsurvivors.org. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We are constantly adding new content. We've got some great images coming out for Respect Life Month, reminding people of where survivors' lives began. And so I am just thrilled for what we're going to accomplish together.
Melissa, you're a blessing. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for standing firm.
Good to see you, Tony.
All right, folks, you have a part to play in this as well, as Melissa and others are doing their best to tell their story, to shape the culture, to shape the policies that we put forth as a nation. You need to be a part of that. You need to pray, you need to vote, and you need to stand. So take the challenge. Pray, vote, and stand.
Thank you, Melissa. I told you would enjoy that interview. And you're really going to enjoy this next one coming up now with Tony once again, as he speaks with House Whip Steve Scalise. A very important interview. So let's tune in now as we follow Tony and his interview with Steve Scalise.
We're here in one of the ornate rooms in the United States Capitol, and I'm joined by two of my really good friends, one who I go way back with, the Minority Whip, Steve Scalise. I almost said majority, maybe that's prophetic, I don't know. Steve Scalise from Louisiana, Ann Wagner from Missouri. Thanks so much for sitting down with us.
Great to be with you, Tony.
Pleasure, just a pleasure.
Ann Wagner, I'm going to start with you because you are the author of a bill that has gotten a lot of attention. It is the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. And if I were to look for something that drew a contrast between the two competing ideologies here in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill, it would be this issue.
It would be, and you would think this would be a bipartisan issue, making sure that we provide medical care to a child that is born alive as a result of a botched abortion. It's unconscionable. It grieves me to think that both sides of the aisle can't come together on an issue like this. But the fact of the matter is that Speaker Pelosi has held this up time and time again. I introduced this legislation very proudly in February, and shortly thereafter, put forward his discharge petition. But this is something that did pass in prior Congresses in the U.S. House. And all that we're asking is that you provide medical support for a child that is born alive.
This is quite amazing, Steve. You know, we go back to the Louisiana legislature, Louisiana being one of the most conservative in terms of the life issue states in America, and you've teamed up with Ann to try to get a vote on this. Now, you have a discharge petition, and you're up to
205 signatures now.
205, you have to have 218, but you've also gone to the floor 80 times for a request that they at least be an up or down vote on this.
Right, you know, and this is, we're the people's house. We're supposed to be this deliberative body where we debate issues that the public is concerned about. When you think about this idea that a few states have already indoctrinated, New York being the most prominent, you heard the governor of Virginia talking about allowing a baby to be murdered after it's born alive and then call that abortion. To me, that's murder. I don't understand why you would need a law to protect it, but then when you look at the fact that in some of these states, they're allowing it. It's legal in states like New York to murder the baby after it's born alive. This is an area where everybody, as Ann said, should be able to come together. Republicans, Democrats, people that are pro-choice think that it's wrong to murder the baby after it's born alive, and yet Speaker Pelosi refuses over and over again to bring this bill to the floor. I think she's scared to death of this kind of debate. First of all, just most people, when you tell them that this is legal, they're shocked that you can actually do this to a baby that's born alive. You can literally murder that baby. So it's something that I think ought to be front and center as we approach an election where so much is at stake, this is one of those dividing points because we've got 205 signatures. This, by the way, got the most signatures of any discharge petition in the history of Congress on the first day. Broke 100 signatures on day one. Never happened before, which tells you this is something people really care about. But Speaker Pelosi is threatening members on her side that sign it. In fact, the first Democrat that signed it, Dan Lipinski of Illinois, represents parts of Chicago, a union liberal who's pro-life. AOC and the far left ran somebody against him in his primary after he signed this discharge petition, and they beat him. They defeated him in his Democrat primary, in part because he's pro-life. So their party is no longer the party that works with us on life issues. They are not only pro-abortion, they're for murdering babies after they're born alive.
I think Dan Lipinski was the last pro-life Democrat, solidly pro-life, and we have a few that may be marginal. But when I got here a little bit before you did, Steve, when I got here 17 years ago, there was about 40 pro-life Democrats.
It used to be a uniting issue, like Ann said. We all stood up for life, and there was a strong majority. It wasn't even marginal. Today, because of Speaker Pelosi's resistance to even a debate on this, you really have no Democrats that are willing to stand up for life.
This isn't really an abortion issue. This is an infanticide issue.
It is. It is an infanticide issue. And the reason that it needs to be taken up federally is that currently there are 24 states that do not, they lack the kinds of protections for these infants that are born alive. And we're just asking that this child, this precious child, be given the same kind of medical support and assistance that any child that may be born prematurely or otherwise would receive. Instead, they're discarded. They're left to die. This piece of legislation would also mandate that the states keep and report data so we can get more accurate figures on this. We held a hearing back in September on this issue and brought in survivors of botched abortions that were left to die but saved by maybe that ICU nurse that came in and said, no, I won't let this happen. We had OBGYNs. We had people who used to be pro-abortion who have changed their views because of these very practices. But to think now that we can't even bring this to the floor. After 80 times, this Congress stood up and the Republicans said, please, Judiciary, let this be discharged. Let us vote up or down on this.
Yeah, and the science is on our side. They want to deny science. So many doctors, as Ann said, have talked about how abhorrent this process is, how it should not be legal, it shouldn't be allowed. And for Democrats who try to say this doesn't happen, we were able to bring some of those survivors of abortion. You want to talk about people, special heroes, people that are alive and have a purpose. Someone who survived an abortion and they're willing to tell their story, and it's a passionate story over and over again. We need to fight for them. So many, and obviously the values voters have been at the forefront of fighting for the least fortunate, the people who don't have the voice that everyone else has, and that's what we need to continue to fight for.
Well, that reporting component of this bill is extremely important because when you look at what's happening across the country, it's not being reported. I think it's about 6 states that report.
6 states that are reporting currently. So, but the information is there, and I know you've interviewed many of the survivors. And Melissa Oden, who comes from my own state of Missouri, is
great spokeswoman, and she tells the story. But also Abby Johnson, former Planned Parenthood clinic manager, says this happens a lot more than you would want to admit. This is a frequent occurrence where a child is born alive.
Yeah, and it's an issue where we really ought to get a resolution on it. We ought to have this debate on the floor. I think Speaker Pelosi doesn't want to bring it to the floor in part because she knows it will pass, because who's going to go back home and explain how they voted against it? Yet some people are hiding behind the veil of Speaker Pelosi so that they don't have to be heard on this. They can sign that petition. 15 Democrats signed the discharge petition, and it's on the floor being debated with an actual vote. And yet so many of those Democrats who ran saying they were pro-life. And again, I mean, if you run, be who you are, but if you say you're pro-life, you have to sign this discharge petition. Otherwise, you're not really pro-life if you're not willing to stand up for a baby born alive outside the womb.
One final question on this, and then I want to go on to the commitment to America that the Republicans have put forward for this election. When you look at the polling data, as you said, this is overwhelmingly supported, even by those that would identify themselves as pro-choice. I mean, this is not even close. So why is Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party so committed to this? Who's controlling the Democratic Party?
Yeah, I think we see that now. It's the far left, it's the socialist left, it's the people that want not only abortion on demand, but they want taxpayer funding. Look, you know, Tony, there is a movement to get rid of the Hyde Amendment. This has been one of the stalwarts that unites both sides for decades, since Henry Hyde brought forward, initially he wanted a constitutional amendment banning abortion. He wasn't able to get the votes, but he didn't give up. And this is something that we all ought to be inspired by, is that we would not have the Hyde Amendment today if Henry Hyde just gave up on his initial quest. But he said, how then do I go about protecting life in other ways? And he was able to get language that ultimately becomes a stalwart for all of our appropriations bills that said taxpayer money cannot be used to fund abortion. They are fervently trying to get rid of that Hyde protection right now.
And truly, if you look at the Hyde Amendment, this has been in place since 1976.
Right.
1976. And when you talk about where the American public is, a vast majority of Americans, wherever you fall on the spectrum, are against any kind of federal or public funding of abortion. And that's all Hyde does, is make sure that we are not federally appropriating money that goes towards abortion.
And that's never been controversial until now.
Yeah,
and that's number one agenda item.
That's why people need to know what's at stake in this election. We always know that elections have consequences. We always see from time to time some elections have more significance than others. I don't think there's ever been a more significant election, because it's not just, you know, Republican moderates versus Democrat moderates, or conservatives versus liberals. It's really freedom versus government-controlled socialism. And part of that, they've got working groups right now on the Democrat side to get rid of the filibuster rule in the Senate. They're talking about expanding the Supreme Court so they can literally flip the Supreme Court, not through the normal constitutional means, but they don't have the numbers now, so they'll just add numbers if they get power. And there is a thirst for power right now like we've never seen, because they want to go after these tenets of our faith and our foundation in this country. We stand up. Our inalienable rights, the very first one is life. Our founders put that there for a reason. They want to undermine that. They will change all the rules they can if they get power. We can't let that happen.
It's a clear difference between a culture of life or a culture of death. It goes to our very foundation, to our very core, and I believe that this election is so very, very important, and the distinction of the line is clear. We want to take care of the most vulnerable in our society, our precious unborn. We want to make sure that we're giving that voice to the voiceless. And the Born Alive bill is something that is, I think, as you said, draws it all together in a very, very profound fashion.
I think this is really the day of black and white. I mean, you can see so clearly the distinction between the two. There's very little middle ground on these core issues. And so, kind of wrapping up our time together, the Republicans have put forth a commitment to America, basically stating what you're for, what you're going to work toward if the American people were to give you the majority again. What are the highlights there?
The real foundations are, first of all, renewing that commitment to America, to go back to those principles that made this country great. We've got to rebuild this country. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Clearly, we need to get through this. We're on the verge, by the way, of a vaccine for the first time in the history of our country, to be just months, not even a year into a virus that this country and this world had never seen, to where we have 3 different drugs that are showing incredible promise in the final stage of FDA testing. And you could actually have multiple vaccines within a few weeks. That's unprecedented. President Trump's leadership through Operation Warp Speed, getting rid of red tape, not cutting any corners, but just saying this is going to be the focus of our country. The best, smartest scientists in the world are working on this and getting tremendous growth and progress. And so we need to get our country back on track. We need to reopen our schools, for goodness sake. If there's never been a better argument for school choice, you have some school systems that are taking your money but won't safely educate your child, when a school system down the street has shown how you can safely educate the child. Why shouldn't the parent be able to choose where their kids go if somebody's not going to safely educate your child? It's hurting those children. So you see it all right now in front of us. Will we get our economy back on track? We had built the greatest economy, maybe in the history of the world, working with President Trump before. We can rebuild it again, and we have to rebuild that great economy again, fighting for families, fighting to restore our way of life. That's really what this is all about.
And Tony, this is about safety and security, both the safety and security of our health and our families, the safety and security of our economy and jobs and growth, and also, I think, the safety and security of our own persons. And part of the safety and security means sticking up and standing firm for our culture of life. Again, giving that voice to the voiceless. It is about freedom. It's about restoring our freedoms that are very basic to who we are, but it's about security, safety, security in every way, shape, or form. And I can't imagine anything more important than securing the life of our unborn children and those that are in fact even born alive.
Yeah, we need to defend life. We need to defend all of our rights right now because, look, the Second Amendment is on the line too. We're not only fighting for life, we're fighting for, as Ann said, the safety and security of our communities. Who would have thought there would be a debate going on in this country whether or not we would support or defund police? I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the bravery and heroism of police officers who fight, defend our lives, defend our communities every single day, and they put their lives on the line. If there's a dirty cop, we all support getting rid of that cop, but by and large, the vast majority of our police officers are risking their lives, and they have a right to go home to their families every night too. This idea that you would take away that basic support mechanism and defund them and make these communities less safe. It's a dangerous concept that actually is gaining some steam, and some cities have done it to the detriment of the people in those communities. So thought we'd be in this debate, but we're in it. And that means we have to fight for those basic principles that not only that make this country great, but that keep our communities safe. That's what's on the line this November.
Final question for you, and you see this firsthand. Most conservatives wanted to, as you've described, Ann, want to take care of their families. They want to live in peace. But we live in this cancel culture where the values that we care about, if you stand up and speak about them, you are viciously attacked. What do the conservative voters out there in America need to do to ensure that we preserve this republic?
Well, a lot of it begins, I think, in the educational process, which begins in the home. The best place to educate and teach our children the values that we share and espouse come from the kitchen table and come from our families. They come from our faith and our faith communities. They come from our educational community, which is really a struggle right now. When you lose the press, when you lose the education, you lose your freedom. So it is up to our families to restore these kinds of values, and I think that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for their freedom to be able to stand up and espouse the values that they believe in for themselves, their families, and their communities.
And look, we know values voters understand this, but we can never overstate it enough. The most important thing you can do is vote. Because when you see people coming and trying to take away the values and the principles that make this country great, the very rights and freedoms that make America the most unique country in the world that fights for freedom every day, if you don't vote, they will outvote you and take that away. They've made it clear they're willing to do this. And we know what we stand for. We're not afraid to say it. The folks on the other side that are saying things implicitly that tell you that they will take those rights and freedoms away, if we don't vote and they do, those rights and freedoms can go away. As Ronald Reagan said, freedom's only one generation away from extinction. We will not let it go extinct on our watch, but that means we have to vote. We know what's at stake. They're saying it directly and indirectly. We know what we stand for. Cancel culture is a dangerous concept. Maybe in totalitarian and communist and socialist regimes, they shut down opposition. We're supposed to embrace it as conservatives or liberals. Our colleges and universities really need to step up and turn away from this. And President Trump's actually been very aggressive at saying you're going to lose federal funding if you turn away people's viewpoints, if you discriminate against people based on their political views. Of all places, college campuses shouldn't do it. But we're seeing that, and that's where we need to stand up against it. So where you see it, stand up and be vocal, but vote. That's the most important thing.
Congressman Steve Scalise, Congresswoman Ann Wagner, thanks so much for sitting down. us and for joining this year's Values Voter Summit. And thank you for standing up for the value voters here on Capitol Hill.
Well, God bless you. God bless this great country, Tony.
Amen.
All right, everybody. You've just heard from some very impressive guests on an issue that we all deeply care about. And now we want to personalize this and ask you our next poll question. So get ready for this. This will be a multiple choice. So let's look at the next question, and we'd love to get your feedback on this. Are you ready? Here's the question. How often is the issue of protecting the unborn addressed in your church? Let me repeat that, but you see it in front of you. How often is the issue of protecting the unborn addressed in your church? And we're going to give you three choices, and here they are. A, quarterly, or like 4 times a year. B, once or maybe twice a year. Or C would be never. We really want to hear from you and kind of how your church is addressing this issue there locally. So once again, just go to, it's right there at your website, type in the appropriate answer, and we'll give you those poll results in just a few minutes. Right now, we want to learn more about another one of our fantastic sponsors. Let's learn about the Judicial Crisis Network. Let's watch together.
You'll hear noise from extremists about the Supreme Court vacancy. Here are the facts. Justice Ginsburg was confirmed in 42 days. Only 3 senators voted against her. Justice O'Connor was confirmed in 33 days. It was unanimous. In 8 out of 10 vacancies like this, the nominee was confirmed. Democrats are shamefully trying to change the facts. Tell the Senate, when a strong nominee is named, follow precedent. Confirm the judge.
Joining me now to discuss the shifting landscape of the Supreme Court is my friend and fellow pro-life activist, Marjorie Dannenfelser. Marjorie is the president of one of the most effective organizations here in Washington, D.C., the Susan B. Anthony List, and she is one of the leading advocates for the unborn in the nation. She is the author of a new book, Life is Winning, and she's here to tell us how the unborn could be winning with a new Supreme Court seat. Marjorie, welcome.
It's so good to be with you again.
Well, Marjorie, you and I have, we've been here a while. We've been in a number of battles. Yes, we've been fighting for the sanctity of human life. How significant is this Supreme Court vacancy, the filling of it, to the pro-life movement?
This is the fulfillment of decades of work that you and I have worked together. Everybody watching here has been a part of that. We are at the precipice of the overturn of Roe versus Wade. And this president, who could be nominating and having confirmed a 3rd Supreme Court justice, he's so proud of that, and we should be proud of that too, means that the unraveling and the overturn of Roe versus Wade could lead to states being emboldened to allow the consensus in those states on abortion to make their way into law. Of course, there should always be a national there should be a national consensus on this. There is a national consensus, but the first step right now is the unraveling of Roe and saving millions of children for decades. It is just that important, and it'll be decided in what, 41 days?
Yeah, and we know it's going to be a fight for all the reasons you just laid out. One of the issues, we're already seeing it in the newspapers and the articles yesterday, today, that is the attacking of the religious background of the nominees. And we've got a number of questions that have come in from our viewers, our values voters. And here's one of the questions. Is it lawful to judge a Supreme Court nominee by their religion?
Well, there should be no religious test. That is a time-tested principle in American democracy. The free exercise of religion, along with the prohibition to not establish a religion, are the parameters that we have. The idea that any of our Supreme Court justices would have a religious test before they were allowed to assume their role on the court is anathema to who we are as a nation, against the very founding, against the idea of why we as Americans exist from the very beginning. And we've already seen the seeds of that idea blooming and blossoming, unfortunately, and out of control like weeds in the Senate already, in confirmation battles just in this last session of the Senate. And already we've seen that thrown against Amy Coney Barrett from Dianne Feinstein. I think we should be ready. We should be ready to be defending our position and defending who this next Supreme Court justice is.
Yeah, it's really telling because the requirement that there be no religious test, meaning that you cannot force someone to have a particular religious view in order to hold a public office. This is really a reverse religious test that we're now seeing today, that if you have religious beliefs, you're disqualified from serving in office. And that's very telling of where the culture is. I want to move on to a couple of more questions that we've gotten from our viewers. What is the most significant character trait that our new judge should possess?
Well, I tend to think of it as that there are two really important pieces. One is that they have a sound jurisprudence, a fealty to the Constitution and the fundamentals of the Constitution. Number two, and one that has generally been ignored by many Republican presidents in the past, but not this one so far, I believe, is that there be a steel backbone, a courage, a fortitude, an ability to go against the tide that is really rushing towards them in these hearings and and honestly, you know what this is, to live in D.C. and to live in the ether that we navigate in, and to really be able to resist that pull. The dinner parties, the opinions of others, the pride, the vanity, the comfort that comes with being a Supreme Court justice, not to be underestimated. We've seen too many justices be attracted by that almost irresistible pull, and the only way to handle that is to believe in something far deeper and more transcendent. A
transcendent truth, being anchored in that transcendent truth, knowing what you believe, and standing firm for it. Other questions that have come in, and this is one already we're seeing the Democrats say, well, if you do this before the election, there's some bad things that are going to happen. And one of the things they're suggesting is packing the court. Here's the question: does it take a constitutional amendment to increase the number of Supreme Court justices?
The terrifying thing is no. It takes a majority vote in the House and the Senate to change, or actually the filibuster rule can be changed just by the Senate. That means you don't need a 2/3 vote anymore for legislation in the Senate. And then what happens is, and they've already been talking about doing this in their own documents, and that is expanding the number of Supreme Court justices that is on the court. The idea that they're not winning the game, so let's change the rules, and all they need is a majority vote in both houses and signed by the president. And then the other thing that they have that is definitely on their docket is expanding the number of states where senators can come from. So Puerto Rico and D.C. could have senators.
Right.
So all of those things, they are emboldened. They have steel backbone. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're ready to do it.
So this election is not only about the court. Obviously, there is time, as we've seen just in that ad that was just aired.
Right.
There's time to get a confirmation through the process all the way, and then a floor vote. And as you have been doing, I've been talking to members of the Senate. In fact, we're going to be talking to Senator Lindsey Graham a little bit later in the program. The full expectation is that this candidate will move through before the election.
Yes.
And then they'll simply try to dilute the advancements that the president has made in terms of putting constitutionalists onto these courts by expanding them.
So we got to do it all. We can't choose.
Right.
We got to do both.
You've got a presidential election. You've got senators that are running.
Yes.
We need to be voting.
It's a huge moment.
It really is.
If we didn't think it was big already,
Yeah.
it's now we had the battle of our lifetime for the presidency because of the Supreme Court. Now we have the Supreme Court happening at the same time. And then we have the Senate battlegrounds all happening at the same time. In our lifetime, though, I'm far younger than you.
That's right.
In our lifetime, in fighting this battle, there has not been another moment. And I know we say it every year, but the truth is it is ratcheted up every election cycle. This is mission central.
That's right. As the great philosopher Barney Fife used to say, this is bigger than the gold truck. It's big. It's big.
I knew I could count on you.
That's right. All right, here we go. What is your best piece of information on each of the top 3 SCOTUS candidates that assures us they are likely to interpret the Constitution as an originalist, a Scalia-type framework?
So the information that I am not a jurist, I am not a jurisprudential expert, but I know people that are. And what I've been reading from, mainly from the Federalist Society and from our friends like Kelly Shackelford and others, is on Barbara Lagoa and on Amy Coney Barrett, and honestly, the rest of the list. There is a analysis on their views on limited government, what they think about precedent, issues concerning the role of the state versus the role of the federal government, and every single one on the list where you participated in this process, I participated in this process of pulling together that list. Every single one of them, with the exception of Joan Larson, to be perfectly honest, is I think holds up under scrutiny on each of those pieces: limited government, precedent, and the role of state versus federal.
The top three females,
Yeah.
the president says it's going to be a female, the top three being considered, you mentioned Barrett, Coney Barrett, Rushing, and Lagoa.
Right.
One of the things I look at a very surface level is they've all just gone through the confirmation process in the last 2 years.
That's a very good point.
For appellate, at the appellate level, which is a significant court. And I look at their confirmation numbers, where you look at Coney Barrett and Rushing, they were 54 votes for, 53 votes for. Then I look at Lagoa, and she was 80 votes for.
Yeah.
In this Congress, in their Senate, I should say, if you get that many votes, there's an issue.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of conversations take place behind closed doors about, what would you do about this, what would you do about that? And if she can assure that many Democrats that she would be good for the court, I'm a little concerned about that.
There's a little pause, yeah. And I think the more we know, the better. The day of stealth candidates is gone. The Harriet Miers moments where they said, trust me, that girl or that guy's gonna be great.
I'm
no
so
more.
grateful we didn't trust. And we rebelled.
That's right.
And we ended up with Justice Alito.
And I do think that there's some on the list that is a little bit more trust me. I don't think that Amy is one of those people.
No,
I think that Amy is one who, in fact, she was last time a little bit. And the president very wisely decided to delay a little bit. And he said, I'm sure he said to you several times, I kind of think it's Amy's seat. He said that over the last couple of years since Kavanaugh, or since Gorsuch. And I think that he's had in his mind that, but he had some self-control and I think waiting so that she had a little bit more time under her belt and a lot more decisions under her belt. So we know so much more about her. She's very well known to them, and on just a purely political basis, the country knows her better. And her narrative is so beautiful. It's one that is easy to sell, hard to punch from the other side. And honestly, I'm looking forward to Saturday when this announcement is made, because I think we're going to be happy.
It'll be here very soon.
That's
Marjorie
right.
Dannenfelser, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we're back and anxious to share with you the poll results from our last question. We wanted to hear from you about how the issue of protecting the unborn is being played out in your own local church. So let's take a look at the results right now. Let's see. So most often it's once or twice a year, which is kind of encouraging. But next to that would be about a third of you said it's never addressed in my local church. What are you going to do about that? That's something that perhaps you have talked to your church leaders about, and if you haven't, perhaps you should. This is an issue that is so critically important to God, certainly taught in the Bible. And if your pastor, your church leaders aren't addressing this issue, there's something wrong. And so I encourage you to reach out to your church leaders if you're among this group. Quarterly, again, a fair amount of you. Monthly, I was impressed by that. We even added weekly, and we do have a number for that. So we thank God for those church leaders, those pastors who are willing to speak out on behalf of those who have no voice. But these are kind of predictable. You know, the Bible clearly says that if my people who are called by my name, God is not shocked when lost people act like lost people, but he is shocked when Christians are willing to let the blind lead the way. We need to step up. And that's part of what we're talking about, part of what we want you to do something about. So let this be a lesson to all of us that we have work to do. Well, we are thankful for the work of the Truth and Liberty Coalition. They're also another one of our great sponsors here at the Values Voter Summit. Let's learn a little bit more about the Truth and Liberty Coalition.
Are you tired of liberal agendas ruining our country, but you don't know what to do about it? That's why Truth and Liberty Coalition was founded. We want to equip you to take back our country and impact the world. Here's how we do it. We educate through broadcasts, conferences, and our website with resources that inform, equip, and motivate. We unify by collaborating with like-minded organizations like the Family Research Council, the Family Policy Alliance, and My Faith Votes. We mobilize by providing practical tools you can use to impact your local community. As Christians, we are called to make disciples of nations. Together, we can change the course of our country for good. Join Truth and Liberty to connect with believers and organizations who not only want to see a change in our nation, but a community that is actually doing something about it. Join us online for our broadcast and subscribe for relevant updates on our website, truthandliberty.net.
One of the sponsors for the Values Voter Summit is my good friend Andrew Womack. He is the founder of Andrew Womack Ministries and Charis Bible College. He's also the president of Truth and Liberty Coalition. Andrew, welcome.
Well, thank you, Tony. It's a real honor to be a part of this Values Voter Summit.
Well, I want to launch right into this to make the best use of our time. You know, our theme for the Values Voter Summit is America, Pray, Vote, and Stand. Begins with prayer, but it doesn't end there. As Christians, we have a responsibility, don't we?
We do. And, you know, I've found that there's a lot of Christians that think that we should just pray, that we should be spiritual, but that we shouldn't get involved physically. And they're looking for this battle to be won with only spiritual weapons. And I hope nobody misunderstands what I'm saying, man. Our battle is first and foremost a spiritual battle. I think that we are fighting a spirit of Antichrist. And so there is definitely a spiritual component to it, but you can't establish a physical kingdom with only spiritual weapons, no more than you can establish a spiritual kingdom with physical weapons. And you know, the Lord even said that his kingdom in Luke chapter 17, verses 20 and 21, he says, it's not going to come with observation, but the kingdom of God is within you. And then he said in John chapter 18, verse 36, when he was standing before Pilate, he said, if my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight. And so his first advent was to establish a spiritual kingdom, and that's the reason he didn't try and get in and change the Jewish nation or the Roman nation. He was establishing his kingdom in the heart of man. But there's coming a time when he comes back. Revelation chapter 14 says that, man, there's going to be a battle and the blood is going to flow up to the horse's bridle. That's 3 or 4 feet high, up to 180 miles. And there will be a physical kingdom established. And when there is, there's physical things that we have to do. So, one of the things that I like about what you're doing, Tony, is the fact that it's not, I mean, you really emphasize prayer. You always talk about that, but you're also, this whole thing about the Values Voter Summit, you are encouraging people to get involved, to vote, and not only vote, but influence other people. And that's what we got to do in order to see this nation preserved and turned around.
Well, Andrew, we are citizens of two kingdoms. We're the citizens of the kingdom of God, but we're privileged, I would say, privileged. And I'm standing here in Washington, D.C., and I feel it a privilege to be an American. And we have a responsibility to this country. You know, the scripture says very clearly that render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. In America, we have a unique situation. The Caesar, really, we're the people, we're government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And the law, the Constitution, is really the defining document. It requires that we stand up, not only exercise the freedom that comes from that document, but defend it as well.
Amen. And Tony, I know that you believe this, that this nation was founded by God. I believe that it was started by God. There's statements that were made even by the British that said if it wasn't for that black robed regiment, referring to the clergy, we would have won the war. And so it was the Lord and God's people that established this nation. And so it was begun in the spirit, but there was a war that was fought. We've fought wars since then. I tell you, if we hadn't have stood up during World War II and have gotten involved and fought, we'd all be speaking German or Japanese today. There are physical things that have to be done. And yet there's a segment of Christianity throughout history, like, I won't name the groups, but certain groups that believe that you shouldn't be involved in politics, that you shouldn't be involved in war, and they just focus only on the spiritual. And it's just as you said, Tony, we're part of two kingdoms. This kingdom was founded and started by God, and we have to pray, yes, do spiritual warfare, yes, but we need to stand up and get involved. And man, I just am 100% behind what you're doing. It's awesome.
Well, Andrew, let's unpack that for just a moment. When we see what's happening across America on many streets in America, the lawlessness, the looting, the disrespect for law and order, and with the Truth and Liberty Coalition, I mean, you're calling on Christians to step out of the church in the power of God. You know, we never leave behind what we're all about. We're about winning men and women to Christ, but we've got to stand up to the cultural forces. How do we do that?
Well, I think that that's a great example, Tony, because yes, it is a spiritual battle. I mean, we could go into time. I saw an interview with Prentice Cullors, one of the ladies that's the co-founder of Black Lives Matter. And she was talking about how every time that there is a black person killed, that they go offer honey and salt as offerings to their departed spirit, and that she feels these people living through her, and it's demonic. And so there are spiritual forces at work, but it also shows the other side. The reason that there are so many people sucked into this and are participating, and there's some people that I'm sure actually are sincere in their desire to see racial inequalities dealt with, but the reason that they're sucked into this is because we haven't physically been involved in teaching the true history of this nation. Our higher education has been taken over by the ungodly, and they have put forth a cancel culture and all of these things. So see, there's physical things as well as spiritual things, and you have to do both. It's not a one or the other situation.
Well, and I think another example of that, Andrew, is the fact that so many churches are being closed down by the government or restricted in certain states. And you, in fact, have experienced this in Colorado. I think that's both spiritual, but it's also in the physical realm, because when we're not able to meet, we're not able to be that salt and light to a community, there are negative outcomes.
That's absolutely true. And, you know, we've been praying against the situation here. We got a cease and desist letter, and that has blown over, but we've got another battle raging that I'm beginning to deal with next week. And it's not a matter of just praying and doing what's right. We've also got to stand up. And if we advocate our constitutional rights, I mean, the Constitution isn't suspended just because of a pandemic. It doesn't give government unlimited ability to come in and control. And if we don't stand up and physically push back as well as stand spiritually, we could lose the freedoms that we've got. And I wrote a letter to the governor, and I told him, I said, look, my cooperation was voluntary in the beginning of this thing, but now they're talking about extending all of these restrictions indefinitely. There is no end to it. And I said, my voluntary cooperation's over. I said, I'm not giving up my constitutional rights. So you have to do both.
Andrew, it's always encouraging for me to come onto your campus, beautiful campus there outside of Colorado Springs. But at the Bible College, Charis Bible College, you have a lot of young people that come there. You have people of all ages, but a lot of young people that come to Bible College there. There's a hunger that's stirring in the hearts of young people right now. What would you say to them at this critical moment in American history?
I'd say one of the things we need to do is they need to educate themselves. They can't depend upon the public school system or the higher education to do it. They need to educate themselves on what the true foundation of this nation is. This is a unique thing that has happened here. There are other countries around the world that have, you know, some degree of freedom. We talk about the Western nations and things like this, but I mean, America truly is unique. It has a godly foundation, It is something that I think is the best hope for freedom in this world. And if they don't know the truth, then they're going to fall susceptible to these lies and deceptions that are being said. So I think one of the things they need to do is educate themselves, get the true facts about things, and then, yes, intercede, pray, and participate. But knowledge is power. We've got to know the truth.
Andrew, just about 60 seconds left, and we're so close to an election, just weeks away from a major defining election. What would you say to pastors out there who have been hesitant to take a stand?
I think that we've got to stand up. And as Charles Finney said, that if America ever fails, the responsibility lies at the feet of the clergy. And I tell you, the clergy is responsible for the apathy that we see. And so we've got to stand up, get a backbone, and begin to speak the truth. The truth is the only thing that's going to set people free.
Andrew Womack, always great to be with you. Thanks so much for being a part of the Value Voter Summit.
Thank you, Tony. You're a blessing.
And I want to thank those pastors out there that are standing up and preaching the truth and challenging their congregations to live out that truth. This is a critical point. We need to take the challenge. Pray, vote, stand. Take the challenge.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We have more breaking news to share with you. As many of you know, this is the Make America Great Again hat. It's a bright red hat, and it has set off a firestorm of resentment. You would think, who would be opposed to making America great again? And yet we see it has risen in the streets. It has been just an absolute outrage that anyone wearing a red hat could be spit on or punched at or cursed at. And so Major League Baseball is rumored to be changing some rules for next season to account for that. So to be politically correct and to further alienate their fans, they will eliminate the following hats for next season: the St. Louis Cardinals, the Philadelphia Phillies, the California Angels of Anaheim, the Washington Nationals, and of course, the Cincinnati Reds. These will all be rumored to be taken off so that we can just keep the peace. Meanwhile, back on planet Earth, we want to share with you more now about another great sponsor that's been with the Values Voter Summit for a number of years, and that, of course, is the BOT Radio Network. Let's learn more about the work that they do.
Celebrating 58 years of broadcast service, BOT Radio Network's purpose is more important than ever: to strengthen your faith, strengthen your family, and strengthen your walk with the Lord. With quality Bible teaching, Christian news and information 24/7. With 120 stations, BOT Radio Network harnesses the power of radio to spread the gospel.
Our confidence is in the Word of God and its power to change the hearts and lives of those who listen. We thank God for the many broadcast ministry partners who share our purpose.
To continue the development of Christian talk radio, we're always on the lookout for the very best quality Bible teaching, Christian news, and information to present to our listeners.
BOT Radio Network is quality Christian talk radio to strengthen your faith, strengthen your family, and strengthen your walk with the Lord. So thank you for listening, and thank you for helping us spread the word.
And welcome back, everybody. In just a moment, we're going to be hearing from Senator Lindsey Graham, so please stay tuned for that. But first, we want to share a little more about another one of our great sponsors. Let's learn about Patriot Voices.
We want to honor the invaluable time parents spend with their newborn children. My presidential budget was the first in history to include a proposal for nationwide paid family leave.
In the drama over the Supreme Court, my next guest will have a starring role. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where the confirmation fight over Ruth Bader Ginsburg's vacancy will play out. He says his front row seat in the last two Supreme Court nominations has given him a whole new perspective on the process. Here to share that with us, along with what the timeline may be, is Senator Lindsey Graham, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, welcome to the Values Voter Summit. Glad to have you back.
Well, thank you. I guess if the Supreme Court nominations are sort of the Super Bowl for our business, this will be number 4 for me. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, and you're in the driver's seat as the chairman of the committee, the president we're anticipating the president making his announcement on Saturday. That
Right.
sets in motion a process. What is that process?
Well, it's a constitutional process. Every president has the right to pick replacements for the Supreme Court, to nominate judges when there are vacancies, and he will do that. History as a guide, there have been 19 Supreme Court nominations in an election year, Tony, where the president and the Senate were the same party. 17 of the 19 were confirmed. This will be the 20th. When the president is of one party and the Senate is of another, there's only been 2 Supreme Court vacancies filled in the history of the country. So we're operating within norms. Saturday, the announcement will come. It will be a qualified woman, a well-qualified, historically qualified woman. I'll lay out the schedule after the announcement, but the goal is to process the nomination, get it to the floor so that Mitch McConnell, if he chooses, can move forward before the election. That's my goal.
And it now appears that you have enough senators, Republican senators, who have said they support that process once it's put in place, and that timeline to hopefully have a floor vote before the election. So why is that important that this unfold before the election?
Well, I think the president believes it's his right, and I can't think of an issue that would show the differences of the parties more than this issue. There is a vacancy on the court. 4-4 is probably not the makeup you would like, with litigation about the election surely to come. Democrats argued that an 8-person Supreme Court was bad for the country. So I think with certain litigation coming over the upcoming election, it would be good for the country to have a 9-member court. And before we get much further, we're celebrating Justice Ginsburg's life. It's an accomplished life, whether you agree with her philosophy or not, which I don't, and I don't think many people listening probably agree with her judicial philosophy, but it was a trailblazing life, and that's to be celebrated. But now it's time for the constitutional process to take over, and it will. You saw Kavanaugh, you've seen Fort, you've seen Thomas, you saw Alito. Why is it always our people who go through these terrible ordeals? The one thing I can promise members here and people listening is that we will start, we'll be firm, and we'll be fair, and we'll make sure the nominee is tested but not abused.
A very good point, Senator, and I want to bring that out. Most of our value voters across the country will remember that moment in the Kavanaugh confirmation where you stood up and made an impassioned appeal for literally humanity and justice. Your point is well taken, and in fact, shortly after the passing of Justice Ginsburg, and again, like you, don't agree with her at all philosophically, but praying for her family as they mourn her loss, and I think that's appropriate. But now as we look forward in filling this vacancy, as you pointed out, let me ask you this. What type of battle do you anticipate, given what we've seen with Kavanaugh, which was unprecedented what we saw? What do you anticipate in the next few weeks?
We're going to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. A challenging hearing is appropriate because this is a lifetime appointment. What happened in Kavanaugh was despicable and should never happen again. We were arguing about a party in high school that nobody could remember where it was at, when it occurred, and there was no validation about any of the accusations. As a matter of fact, the people allegedly at the parties didn't recall anything bad happening, and that turned the country upside down. They tried to ruin Judge Kavanaugh's life. Since the passing of Justice Ginsburg, Act Blue, which is the Democratic funding site, has raised over $150 million. I'm up for re-election. My opponent has raised, we think, $10 million. I've done 3. So if you want to help me and others in this fight, lindseygraham.com. We're getting outspent 4-1, outraised about the same amount. I just need enough to fight back. So I expect, given the political donations, that the Democratic Party is on fire. They're looking for a champion to come after this nominee. And if I were them on the Democratic side, I would remember what happened in Kavanaugh. Religious differences abound in America, but I am very much aware of the fact that if it's somebody of faith and they attack the person for being faithful, we'll have a hell of a fight.
Well, I think, Senator, many are prepared for just that, because if we see an appointment to the court as, among the selections that are among the candidates being considered for this, this is going to be a significant shift of the court. I mean, we're going to see a court for the last 40 years since the Warren Court and their expansive judicial approach. The ability to have a consistent conservative majority on the court, which means all of those issues, religious freedom, the issue of the sanctity of human life, it's a seismic shift of the court. So I would anticipate a ferocious battle unfolding there in your committee.
Yeah, I think so too. But they're going to have to evaluate. We're going to have a hearing for the whole country to watch. The nominee will be closely watched in terms of disposition, in terms of intellect and personal ability. Their story will matter. If Democrats try to destroy this conservative nominee, they do so at their own peril. In 2013, they changed the rules to pack the DC Circuit Court that hears all the adjudication against the government. They thought they were going to win in 2016. And here's what I would say: elections have consequences. And you're going to see that unfold in October. People will be watching TV. There'll be prayer groups. I felt it during Kavanaugh. Judge Kavanaugh, if he moved into your neighborhood, you'd be lucky to have him as a neighbor. Him and Amy are good people. I've known them for a very long time. And you saw an attempt to ruin a very good man's life just to keep the seat open. I am ready to play it any way they want to play it. I'm praying that we have a challenging hearing for the nominee, but it's not embarrassing to the country in the Senate. People of faith, your faith may be subject to a lot of questioning. It's okay to be a religious conservative. It's okay to be on the Supreme Court if you're a religious conservative. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure the person nominated will apply the law to the facts and put their personal beliefs aside, but we're not going to tolerate a country where you're punished for your faith.
So, Senator Graham, are you saying there's a line with which you're not going to let the committee cross when it goes into attacking someone's faith?
Just stay tuned.
Believe me, I will be stay tuned, and we will be watching very, very closely, and so will a lot of value voters across the country. Let me close our time together with this, Senator. You made reference to this, and I don't think people understand that several members of the committee, this is an election year. You are between being in your home state and campaigning for re-election in a tough election campaign, of course. Members of the committee who would vote for a constitutionalist are being targeted in their races, so that's understood. And so we encourage people to stand with those who stand with the Constitution and conservative values. How can people be praying for you and your colleagues as you go into what's going to be, I think, a very, very challenging, difficult, but intense few weeks?
Well, number one, pray for the nominee. Pray that she will have the courage and the fortitude to accept a challenging event, and that she can get through something that may get off the rails like it did in Kavanaugh. Pray for me that I'll have good judgment, good temperament, that I will be fair to the other side, that I'll have the courage of my convictions to stand up when it gets off track. We've got great members on our side. Tom Tillis and Joni Ernst are in tough races. I'm in a tough fight. My opponent could raise $100 million. The left hates my guts, Tony, for Kavanaugh, and I've dared to support Trump. I've become, for some reason, their number one target. My opponent raised more money in August than any Democrat running for the Senate, and South Carolina is still structurally a Republican state. But when you're spending $5 million a week on TV ads, everybody in South Carolina will see his TV ads at least 130 times in 1 week. I'm sure it's going to be the same for Tom Tillis, Joni, and John Cornyn. So if you got $5 or $10, send it. LindseyGraham.com. Help us all financially so we can push back. I want to make the court fight the center of my election. I doubt if he does, but I need the resources to make it the center of my election. And you can pray if you can give great. Bottom line is, this is what I came up here to do. This is why I ran for office. This is why you knock on doors and you make phone calls. This is the time for us. This is our time, and we will meet the challenge.
Well, Senator Lindsey Graham, you're doing a fantastic job as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Grateful that you've joined us here at the Values Voter Summit, and we will be praying for you. And we'll be praying that your sense of humor holds up, because you've got, most people don't realize, you've got a great sense of humor, and I think that helps you a lot in these difficult times. So we'll be watching, we'll be praying, and we'll be supporting the president's nomination to the Supreme Court.
God bless, my friend.